The biggest thing is not exposing the child to the conflict. So if there's, back and forth heated discussions, it does not need to be a verbal discussion in front of the kids. That's just really harmful for them. It is always going to be complicated to take kids from two separate families who have been independently having
Mhm.
different rules, et cetera, and blending them. And then you have the
Yeah.
dynamic of they're also going to another parent's house and how do you line up schedules? And, what about a different house has different rules and routines, et cetera?
The one thing that I said I'm not gonna do is trash talk anybody. I didn't wanna hear my dad saying stuff about my mom saying stuff about my dad. It just you have both parents, you love them, and it's so horrible and hard to put your child in that situation. So we decided that, we're going to handle this like adults. And it took time and it's not easy at all, but it's a lot of communication. And I think time can heal things. Welcome to Holistic Dose. We've been through the plot twists, divorce, parenting, burnout, reinvention, and now we're doing midlife with way more honesty and way less BS. Think of us as your unfiltered friends, here to remind you that you're not too late, too old, or too far behind. I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Jeanette.
And today we're going to be talking about a topic that we reached out to our listeners and said, what do you guys want us to cover? So we're tapping into something from our personal experiences, which is blended families. And Jeanette, you have a lot of experience with this too within your law practice.
I do. Yeah. So I have been divorced and then I remarried, and I have two stepdaughters, and then I have my own son that I brought into the marriage. And then, of course, I work as a divorce attorney. And so issues with blended families, step parents, step siblings, et cetera, are very common with just my day-to-day work.
Yeah, and I wanted to cover some quick stats here. So, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, over 16% of kids in the U.S. live in blended families. So
Oh,
that could be
wow.
a that could be a combination of step families with step parents or step siblings. And from being a family law attorney, the divorce numbers are pretty high. So it's 1 in 3 marriages are going to end up in a divorce and end up rather remarrying. So that's basically 40% of married couples with children are step couples. So that's where one person is going to have a child from a previous relationship. So these stats, is something that's only, as we see, keep growing. And we want to be able to talk about and give you guys some real life tips on how you can manage it and navigate it and hear a little bit about our own personal experiences too.
Yeah, and as a step parent myself, I feel like the challenges are not talked about very frequently. We think about the Brady Bunch, and
Agree.
we have just these ideas of, oh, we're going to be one big happy family, but it's actually a very challenging dynamic. And I think that we need to talk about that more and be transparent about it.
I agree. I think like in our past conversations when you've talked about what are some of the things that your clients are talking to you about most frequently, and it is, of course, the kids. And they're navigating questions such as what are the rules or limitations that they can put around when their partner goes to the other partner's house, and what family members or dating partners are allowed to be seen or not. So if you can talk to us a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things about divorce and then having kids together when you're divorced is the reality that you have to let go of some control. You're not always going to know what's going on in the other home, and you definitely can't control what's going on in the other home. And this is one of the biggest things that I see people struggle with within divorce, and then later on with modifications and post-divorce issues. Um, you know, what I've experienced personally, and also what I tell clients, is a lot of it is like playing, remember that game of telephone where you
Yes.
whisper and so that's kind of what happens when you're a divorced family with kids,
Mhm.
and especially when there are new partners and new kids involved. It gets complicated. And so you have, my kid goes over to dad's house, and now Logan, my son, he has a stepmom and he has a half brother. And so, Logan will go over there, and then he comes back and he'll talk about what happened, et cetera. But it is like playing a game of telephone. you really don't know exactly what's happening because you weren't there observing it yourself.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
you're hearing one perspective and it's a child's perspective. So, really the one big takeaway that I hope people would get from this, if they can only get one, is to know that you can't control those things, to
Mhm.
take what is said with a grain of salt, and to really focus on building the best life for your child when they're with you, because that's what you can control. And now, of course, sometimes really bad things do happen where you have to step up and lawyer up, etc. But the vast majority of the time, what I see is people just kind of spinning out of control and getting extremely stressed about things that go on in the other home that are simply out of our control, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, and that's probably more the norm is the getting stressed about it. And I think my situation is probably not the norm. I'm thankful for it. When I got divorced with my ex, and I have just the one daughter, Gabby. She just turned 15. We decided that we were going to do this differently. His parents were still married, but I came from a divorced family. And then my mom had many past husbands and boyfriends since then. And the one thing that I said I'm not going to do is trash talk anybody. I didn't want to hear my dad saying stuff about my mom saying stuff about my dad. It just, you have both parents, you love them, and it's so horrible and hard to put your child in that situation. So we decided that, we're going to handle this like adults. And it took time and it's not easy at all, but it's a lot of communication. And I think time can heal things.
It's very hard to separate our own emotions, or I'll say my own emotions
Yeah.
about my ex-husband, and realize that my relationship with him is completely different than my child's relationship with him.
Hmm.
And it's hard when you have those negative feelings going through a divorce to really respect your child's relationship, but you have to do it because that's so important, and you have to encourage that relationship. And I think a lot of parents don't realize that they're making their child feel bad because of even body language or
Oh,
facial
yeah.
expressions about the other parent.
Yeah. I mean, it stems also to the other grandparents that are involved as well. So the families, they run deep, right? So it's not just how you're talking. You could be dropping your kids off at your mom's house, let's say, to hang out with the grandparents for the weekends. And it's the side conversations that you're having with them about your ex that they're overhearing. And then sometimes it's what the grandparents are saying too. And again, we can't control those, but I think it all stems from having those conversations and you set the tone with your family members. Hey, we're getting a divorce. I know that you're going to want to be on my side and my ex is going to be the bad one, but that's not always the case. And you have to set those boundaries, I feel, with your family members and say, this is the type of relationship that we're going to have as co-parenting, and we're not going to trash talk the other person or undermine when they're with you.
Yeah,
It's just,
absolutely. It's important.
yeah, setting those boundaries. And I think also, I've been through situations too with my daughter where, um, you know, my mom may have said something or my dad may have said something about my ex. And I have let my daughter heard, I've let them know in front of her,
Yeah.
that's not what we're doing.
How
No.
did
And
they
that's not
react
the
when you
case.
called them out?
I think they were kind of like, oh, you know, um, they're not used to it perhaps, but I think it's part of them too growing up and realizing that I am now an adult and this is my family and this is how we do things here, right?
Yeah.
There was a random time when my dad was coming over to visit when he first moved here, and he had this rule that in his house he takes off the shoes as soon as he walks in the door. That's not a rule I have established in my house. So when he came over and he was hanging out with Gabby and she comes home from school, he got on her case because she didn't take the shoes off at the door. And I said, and she got all upset. And I was like, that's not fair. You can't implement rules in your life in my house that apply to you and then get upset with her. So it's no different there. It's honestly, it's like letting her know that, we don't talk about the other parents, and this is how we're going to handle it.
And all of us will make a misstep. So I think that's important
Hmm.
too, is to give yourself grace. So, I've had a really positive co-parenting relationship with my ex. And we've been lucky that we've been pretty much on the same page with everything as far as schools and medical stuff, et cetera. And for the first time we had a disagreement when so Logan was 4 when my ex and I separated. So from the time he was 4 up until high school, we had never had a big disagreement on not seeing
Hmm.
eye to eye on a big decision for Logan. But then when he was starting high school, we disagreed on where Logan should attend high school. And we just had completely different perspectives. There wasn't an ability to compromise because he's going to go to one school, right? So it was tough to navigate and emotions ran high. And I can't even remember what it was that I said, but I got really mad and upset and melted down and said something to Logan, nasty about his dad. And I brought that up. So Logan had a therapist, still does have a therapist, and I mentioned it to the therapist. I said, "Hey, just want to let you know, like I screwed up. I said this." And the therapist said, "Look, it's probably a good thing that he saw that you're human, that
Yes.
he saw that this upsets you and you feel strongly about it, etc." And that was interesting that I felt so guilty. And I think part of
Hmm.
it's because I'm a divorce attorney and
Right.
we constantly hear in the family law system over and over and over and over, do not badmouth, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it.
Hmm.
And then I did it and I was like, oh no.
Oh my God.
So, it's a very bad thing to be doing that regularly. But if you slip up and it's like a one time thing or, a very rare occurrence, know that you're also human. And the biggest thing is pointing that out to your child. And I said, Logan, I am so sorry. That was not right for me. I was emotional. I didn't even mean the things that I said. That, you know, this was just a very stressful thing that all of us were going through.
Right. I would say even before we can get to talking about how you go about blending families, I think you have to take a bit of a step back. So if we can all imagine that when I was in my 20s when I got married, I was dating my ex-husband since was like 19, and we grow up together. We got engaged, we got married, I think I was 27 or 28. Did we have the conversation of, are we on the same page on parenting? No, I'm going to say we didn't. They say have the conversations about religion and parenting and finances and everything. And I really am curious how many people do, because I feel like we're in this la-di-da state, and then women's hormones are kicking in, got to have a baby. And you're like, oh, we'll figure it out when we get there. So what happens is you go into this marriage and relationship and you are figuring it out along the way. And there's no rule book. Every
Yeah.
child and individual is different. So what happens is you end up in this marriage totally probably on different two types of parenting styles that you're figuring out along the way. Like, I do or don't value this as much as he does, and how that affects it. And then you get divorced, and then you're like, oh, I want to establish what that is. So you're establishing that as an individual, and then you're trying to figure out how your partner is parenting too. It's complicated.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, for sure. I think even people who have those conversations when they get married, especially like when it's your first marriage and you're young and you've never had kids, so much of it's idealistic anyway. So
Totally.
even if you
Hmm.
thought, and how many times did we say, oh, when I have kids, I'll never do this or I'll never
Oh,
do that? And you
yeah.
don't get it until you have the
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
So, I think that
You
when,
absolutely never know, which is why you don't listen to advice from others that have not
yeah.
even been there, because they have no idea.
Yeah. So, I think in an intact family, you're kind of figuring it out as you go and figure out what works for you. And then with blending families, it's hard because you have two families who already have their rhythm and
The
routine
groove.
in place.
Mhm.
And that's something that Jeff and I mean, it was absolutely a challenge was we had very different rules and we parented different,
Mhm.
and we actually hired a parenting coach
Oh, you
to,
did?
yeah, while we were dating.
That's a great idea.
And yeah, because I remember the day that I was like, we've got to talk to someone and figure out a middle ground. Jeff is very, I almost say hands off. Like, what's the word? I think a lot of dads are like this.
Yeah, yeah,
I think like just not as structured. Also, everybody in the family except me has ADHD. Like my
yeah.
husband has it, my son has it.
I could probably speak to this. So since we just came back from a
Yes,
6-day
my
vacation where
stepdaughters
I
have
joined you
it.
guys. Yeah.
Yes.
I would say I wouldn't say call him hands off because he's very
Yeah, he's an
involved,
involved dad, but
but I don't know. I think because you're very like type A that it it creates a perception maybe that he's not on top of things. So you're taking
yeah.
more of the I don't know, the
Yeah.
load.
So there when we were dating, we took all of the kids to the circus and we rode MARTA.
Oh,
And it was crowded and my perception were that his kids
mhm.
were like feral, like feral animals, just like I felt like it was like crazy, and I'm
Right,
like, oh my
right.
god, and I
Plus,
felt like
you also come from just having one child, and he has 2. He's
yes.
used to the balance
And
of it.
yeah, like I only have one child, I'm also an only child. And
Mhm.
so I'm used to structure and quiet and not having chaos. And so yeah, like then I meet Jeff and it felt like a lot of chaos. So yeah, we did go to a parenting coach and that was incredibly helpful. I think that
How many sessions did you go to?
I felt like we did quite a few because when we first went, we weren't even incredibly serious. Like we weren't engaged yet. It was more like, let's talk through like our differences in parenting and kind of
Could this even work?
explore how this would even work.
Right.
And then when we got engaged, it was more like, okay, how are we going to blend families? And
Yep.
so we did quite a few. I mean, maybe like 8 or 10. Um,
Were the kids ever involved in these?
no.
Okay.
And it really was about like identifying like how are we going to be a family? What are our top priorities together? What are our family rules? What are things that some of us might, by some of us, usually me, need to like let go and be more laid back about, et cetera.
Okay. I heard about that concept. Someone mentioned this to me like a year ago or something when they said, "Oh, they have certain family values." And I was like, that concept, I never it seems like, we go through and we build like I'm working on building a bunch of businesses
Yeah, our
now.
businesses have values.
You have mission, vision, values,
Yeah.
and you have to follow all the rules of everything. And I know we have personal values, but it never occurred to me to create like, what does that look like for our family? Right? Does that mean that when we sit at the dinner table, it's phones down? Does it mean that when we're on vacation, like when we've been many times, like when we went on the cruise, that we do breakfast together, lunch is free range, and dinner we meet? Or what does it look like as far as just roles and responsibilities and chores and everything? Or, we don't do this or we do that. And I still have it on my to-do list, even though it's my family of 2, just Gabby and I, and our dog Leo. But I think it is important to establish that, whether, that's just you're as a single parent with your kids, but then with a new partner while you're looking to blend families and then create new ones together.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it was all about was figuring out what are our values as separate families and then okay, then coming together, what are our new values and traditions, et cetera, going to be. And so that was really helpful. And so I think it's important to go into it without your head in the clouds and
Yeah.
realizing this is complicated. It is always going to be complicated to take kids from 2 separate families who have been independently having
Mhm.
different rules, et cetera, and blending them. And then you have the
Yeah.
dynamic of they're also going to another parent's house and, how do you line up schedules? And, what about a different house has different rules and routines, et cetera.
Yeah, there's so many nuances there, and then you think about too. I know that Logan was 4 when you guys divorced. Gabby was also. She was like a month, 2 months away from turning 5, and I had read, that if you're planning on getting divorced, 5 and under is probably the best. They're gonna just grow up, if you think about even yourself, like, how many memories do you have where you were under 5 years old? Probably very few. So you're gonna create that new norm as being the single parent or in a new blended situation. It's best. So those who are waiting around for
Yeah, for sure.
thinking it's gonna be better divorce later, give Jeanette a call if you're in Georgia. But, not promoting it, but it truly does, it makes things a lot better. So then
Yeah.
if the kids were in it a lot longer, it's gonna be a lot more challenging, a lot more emotions between everybody to balance.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, my situation was it was pretty, it was pretty good, but even still, it took, I would say, a solid year before I could feel like, because I was, like I dated Manny since I was 19. So we were friends first and foremost, right? And you grow up, you have this identity with a person, and all of a sudden you're not allowed to talk to them, or you can't just shoot the shit like you did. And it's really a weird thing to go through. So you want to get back to that as soon as possible. And being able to have jokes or whatever and just talk normal. But I had to accept that he needed his time and his space and to not push it. So what it looked like for us was the first year, we decided, Christmas Eve was always a really big thing for him, for Noche Buena, because he's Colombian. And, and then I wanted to have her after the Christmas morning wake up, but we really wanted to do Christmas morning waking up with the presents together. I was dating somebody at the time, and he said he wasn't going to date anybody for like a long time, and then all of a sudden he was. So he was in a relationship as well. So how it looked like was that first Christmas, he had her on Christmas Eve, and then Christmas morning, I went to his place. We had breakfast there, and then my dad came over as well. It was great. She did the gifts there, and then I took her and had her back at my house. Now, the next year, his relationship was a little bit more further advanced, and he said, that's not going to work for us. You
Yeah.
can't come over for breakfast. And at first I was like, wait, what? Like,
Yeah, and that's interesting that you bring that up because I will see people who want to actually put in their parenting plan that they will spend like Christmas together, kids' birthdays together. I'm like, you know what? That sounds really great right now.
yeah,
And if you can do it, then great. Do that and keep doing it. But you don't want to legally bind yourself to, if you don't spend Christmas Day together, you're in violation of a court order.
yeah.
And it's usually because of when you have those new partners involved. They don't want to go over to your
No,
ex-husband's house for Christmas,
no.
and they have their own traditions and their own families.
And you kind of have to let them, and you are no longer in control. And now I'm the first one to say, I am a huge control freak. You know that very well. But you have to, look, if you decided to go down this path and get divorced and you have kids and you're going to eventually have a blended family, you just got to release the control and
Yeah.
know that things aren't going to be the way they were. And you know what? Christmas comes every year, and Thanksgiving and Hanukkah and all the holidays. And it's not a big deal if you have to celebrate on another day. At the end of the day, it's just a day. Like, really, you know, it, I've had many Christmases where I've just been home by myself and had pizza and I was fine. Because if you work yourself up to that in your mind, you're going to get so upset, which I've seen a lot of moms like really crying, like, how am I going to do this? I'm like, at the end of the day, it's truly just a day.
Yeah.
It's what you make of it, you know?
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. It's hard for people to understand that until you've gone through it. It really is not that bad to be
Like, what
alternating
do you
holidays
mean?
and
We're not, you get your family members involved too that have their traditions that they're used to having you and your kids over. And they're like, what do you mean you're not going to come over with the kids? And then you have to explain it to them. And it's like, you know what? I'm not going to come over at all if that's what it's going to mean.
yeah.
So they have to accept that things are going to be different because this is the path you took.
Yeah.
And you're on your way to creating something new and better potentially. So, though I would say that it even still, regarding introducing a new partner, I felt as though it was important when I made that step that I told my ex-husband, "Hey, this is who I'm dating. I want you to meet him." Now, I had hoped for the same there, that he would, be like, "Okay, you can meet her." And he's like, "No, we're not ready." And I got upset for a minute. And then I'm like, you know what? It's fine. I know the type of person he is. He's not going to choose somebody that he's gonna be a horrible partner, and I just had to put my trust in that. So when my ex and his then girlfriend, which is now his wife, decided it was time to meet, it was fine, and we met, and then we turned out to now, over time, again, time heals things. We've had great conversations. I go over there now on Christmas morning to pick her up, and they invite me in for a drink.
Oh,
They give
nice.
me food. Yeah, and I even go over to his in-laws' house and hang out there. And some people might say, like, that's bizarre, but at the end of the day, it's just the how I look at it is the more people that I can have in Gabby's life that really love her and show her, what family looks like. And family to me, family is not blood at all. Family is love. I don't really have a huge family, and some members are involved and some are not. And that's okay. This train's going to keep on rolling. But I do surround myself with close friends like you and the kids that Gabby gets to feel like she has extended siblings there. And if it means that, and now because my ex's parents are both passed, that his new in-laws can take her in as their own, like that's
Yeah.
what brings me joy. I'll go
Yeah.
over there and hang out and they give me a plate of food and we hug and embrace and I'm on my way. But it makes me happy for her to see that I'm
Yeah.
good with that. Yeah, but I know that that is not the reality for everybody, maybe
Mm-mm.
not even the most. So let's talk about it when it's not amicable because
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of people don't have good co-parenting relationships, and, there are a number of things that you need to do. Really, it's mostly about protecting your own mental health and protecting your child from that conflict. So the biggest thing is not exposing the child to the conflict. So if there's, back and forth heated discussions, it does not need to be a verbal discussion in front of the kids. That's just really harmful for them. Also having boundaries. So one of the hardest things in that type of situation is your phone might be blowing up with texts from the other person, or if you get email notifications. So you might need to like turn notifications off or set a boundary that's like, I will read your messages and respond once a week, every Friday, but I'm not going to be responding. And that's a big thing is you only can control how you're going to react, right?
yes.
I
Mhm.
can't control if they send me 50 text messages a day. All I can do is say, here's how I'm going to react. So trying to tell the other person, don't send me these text messages or don't do this,
Yeah.
it's not going to work because you can't say, it just doesn't work.
No.
So instead say, I'm not going to respond to text messages right away. This is too much for me. This is how I'm going to handle it. And then you have to follow through. And so then maybe it's every Friday, you sit down and it's your time where you go through all the crap they sent you and you respond to it. And you also don't need to respond to everything. Only respond to the comments and questions, et cetera, that are actually necessary for co-parenting. If
Mhm.
there's digs in there, or sometimes the person will rant about their opinion on how you should be doing things, either ignore it or just say noted, or don't get into it. Because the more you give your opinion back and engage with them, you're just prolonging the difficult dynamic there. And there's some good resources. My favorite is called the High Conflict Institute, and Bill Eddy, EDDY, is one of the founders of the High Conflict Institute, and he's both a therapist and an attorney. And so he has a lot of information on, what it's like co-parenting and within the legal system, and then from the perspective of a psychologist as well, or maybe he's a licensed clinical social worker. But there are a lot of resources there on how to communicate. One is called a BIF response.
Mm.
It stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And it basically is about how to respond to accusatory texts and emails from a high conflict person, and it can actually help in the workplace. The book Biff is not specific to co-parenting. It's really just how to respond to high conflict people in those written messages. And then there's another book called Ear, which is that's for verbal communication. I think it stand for empathy, maybe attention and respect. But he has a lot of resources. So the High Conflict Institute has a lot of resources on what do you do, what are some specific techniques and things to do if that high conflict person is on the other side of your co-parenting relationship. And you're
Mm,
not going to change them. That's really
no.
important to understand is you're not going to change them. They're going to stay high conflict. All you can do is change how you react to it, and that's kind of it.
And know that these people are gonna be in your kids' lives forever, and even things like, I wanna make sure that I know it's not my responsibility and this is the control on me, but there's even things where I am like, is my ex taking care of his health or is he up to date on things? I was very much like keeping more closer tabs on those things in the start, and I had to kind of back off with that, but at the end of the day, it's because I care and I wanna make sure that her dad's gonna be around for her, and so what are some of the tools do you see? Because I communicate with my ex just via normal text, but is there any other tools that people can use, or what do you see that's more popular?
There are some co-parenting apps. The one that is recommended the most by attorneys and therapists is called Our Family Wizard. That one is a paid app. It's not real expensive though. It's I don't know, maybe I don't even want to say how much it is, but it's fairly nominal. And that is a really good communication tool for several reasons. One is all communication goes through there and it can't be modified. So if it ever needs to be printed out for a hearing or for a guardian ad litem and a case to review, it's all in one place. You can even give them a login, and that professional will then log in and look at the communication. There's also some really good tools in there, like there's a shared calendar. And
Mhm.
so it's a nice way just to have everything in the same place. And so you have that shared calendar, and there's a way to even request like swapping dates. So that way it's limiting the conversations you have to have. You can just put in a request for swap dates, and then they look at it, then they either accept or deny, and you don't have to have the conversation. There's also you can submit like receipts for reimbursement. So it's really a way to reduce communication as much as possible so you can just kind of treat it like a business, like, transaction, right?
I would say that is pretty much that is very close to what it's like. We started with just the Google Share calendar. So we have a family calendar, and we've had it forever since the beginning. We just put dates on there. So what I do is I never assume. Even though I think that's one thing that's really important, it's about respect. So even if you didn't feel like you had respect or were annoyed with your partner during your marriage, this is totally different. Your respect level needs to change now, and it's a bit different. You respect them that they have their own boundaries, rules as how they want to parent and everything, and their relationship with your child. So I never go in thinking that, oh, even though he doesn't care about whether he has her on Thanksgiving or not because he didn't before, I don't go in assuming that I'm just going to go with her on a trip because we don't have our holidays. Like we may have put them in writing, but we are so flex with it.
Mhm.
I never go in there and just assume. I always will go and ask, hey, just wanted to see if this would be okay. I would like to take her to visit my sister. Is that okay? I still run those by him. Even though we do our same thing we do for Christmas every year, we still talk about it. I think it's really important to make sure you're aligned. And then know that where your strengths and weaknesses are and work that angle. For example, me being very ADHD, I am horrible with keeping track of things. And he knows that. But we've had to have these conversations that I'm like, if you can help and manage that family calendar, you be the main one. I'll go and add my dates on there. But he it was always making sure he's putting the doctor's appointments. He even will put reminders on there for me. This is really
Oh.
nice of him. Tiffany, call and schedule her, 1-year doctor checkup. Like he just texted me about it today. And I was like, yes, I know. And then if I keep forgetting, like he'll do that, which again, that's really nice. I do not expect this of him at all. But it's like giving the other person grace, knowing that, they might have their own family that they're running. And he does. He has a daughter now that's 7 years old. And I have a friendly relationship with her too. She even said at one point she wanted to have a sleepover at my place. I was like, let's do it. But I think it's respect and communication. It's so
Yeah.
important.
And, I can't remember what it was that came up in my personal life. At one point, I think it was when we were in the co-parenting, or not co-parenting, in the parent coach, Jeff and I.
Mhm.
And that parent coach was a therapist. Something came up in my personal life where I brought up like the rules being different at the other parent's house, and like a concern about, the rules being different between your mom's house and dad's house.
Yep.
And the therapist said, this really isn't that big of a deal. Yeah, some things being consistent, like I think one that's kind of important is like a bedtime, like
Yes.
the
Getting on a
routine.
routine.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
not every rule has to be the same. Like the shoes. It's okay if at, dad's house you have to take off shoes and at mom's house you don't. And the way the therapist explained it to me was, this is the way life is structured. Jeanette, when you go to work, you have a certain set of rules. When you go
Yes.
to church, you have another set of rules. You don't behave. Yeah, the same things aren't okay at church as they are at work. And then when you go home, you have different rules. School, you have rules. And so it's normal for every place to have a different set of rules that you have to conform to. So this
Mhm.
isn't a big deal to have a child have a different set of rules at mom's house than at dad's house, because that's how life is structured anyway.
That's a really good point. And then too, they've already learned from what their rules are when they're at home or at school, and how they should act amongst their peers. They might have play fights at home with their siblings, but not with their classmates. So
Yeah,
that's,
exactly.
that's a really good step or tip. So because I'm not a step parent, I'm just really curious about how you dove in. And I know the kids were really young, but how did that work and how did you navigate it? And was there the introduction and you went through the whole process of like, I'm going to be your stepmom? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, yeah. So the way Jeff handled it, which I wasn't really in agreement with, but it's his kids, whatever. He's like, I don't want to tell them I'm dating you. You're just a friend. So like we got together and did some stuff with the kids together, and it was like, hey, this is my friend. And the
Because
kids
how
are
old were the girls at that point? They were pretty young.
they were all pretty young. So let's see. Autumn, when Jeff and I met, was 4, about to turn 5. So 4, and then Logan and Ava would have been 5 going on 6. So
Hmm.
they were little. And, I think for the first couple times they got together, they didn't think anything of it. But eventually they were like, are you guys dating? Are you dad's boyfriend? And, they figured it out. Um, and I don't remember really what I told Logan. So some of this is kind of blurry, but I do remember when we started getting serious, and it was not a simple transition for all of the kids. And this is
Did they
something.
feel like you were replacing their mom?
So this is something a therapist told us, because we were surprised because their mom had already moved on, and I can't remember if she was remarried at that point, but was definitely like they were building a house together, living together, like,
Hmm.
so she was in this committed relationship, and so it surprised us that when mom had already moved on, like, why would kids be upset over our relationship? And what the therapist said, this is actually common for the child to get even more upset over the second parent getting married because it is more finality.
Oh, I was wondering if it had to do with the fact that them being girls and the mom, because I was wondering if, like, then Logan felt more weird with Jeff coming in your life
But
versus.
and what the therapist said was that typically it's because when the second parent gets married, it is really final that mom and dad are not getting back together. Because in
Interesting.
order for that to happen, 2 marriages would have to fall apart, and it's just, yeah.
Oh,
So, yeah, I mean, it was something that the kids did have to work through, and we had to give the kids time, and that's something else as parents to realize, you know, it might not go along your ideal timeline as to when the kids are accepting. And something it's not personal. Yeah, I mean, divorce is just it's hard on kids. It's hard on kids for their parents to not be together. But something else a therapist said was like kids don't make adult decisions. The kid doesn't decide if you're going to remarry or not. Like the parents have to make decisions that are best for the family as a whole. And,
Mhm.
if the parent knows like this is a positive thing for my kids and our family, even if the child doesn't see that it makes sense to move forward. But yeah, you know, there was one kind of aha moment when or I'm trying to describe what it was like. It was a comforting moment. I guess it was a moment where we almost felt kind of relief when we decided that we were just going to ask the kids, what would you think if we were to get married? And we were bowling. We were out bowling with all three kids, and we were expecting at least one or two of them to be like, no, because they'd said stuff before. And we were out bowling, and then I asked, "Hey, what would you guys think if Jeff and I got married?" And we weren't living together. Like we were still living in separate houses. And I was really surprised that Jeff's oldest, Ava, said, and she really like thought about it and said, "Well, mommy has moved on and is happy, and I want daddy to also be
Aw.
happy." Yeah, and that was a moment where I'm like, "Oh, wow, like, they've worked through this and
Mhm.
get it, even though they're so little, they get that, and they do want to see both their parents be happy."
That's all they want at the end of the day, and I wonder though too if that's I imagine it's probably a little bit better to give them the time and not make them feel like you guys are all moved in and doesn't
Yeah.
work out. I feel like too many people maybe rush into that too fast, and then
Mhm.
it's, like, harder to go back and go
Yeah.
through it again because it's like they get comfortable. I think that's what my mom did so much. She just moved every person in that she was dating, and I'm like, "This is horrible." But I never went through the experience though, um, of being around, like, other kids. Like, all these partners were always single, there wasn't any children, so I
Oh,
never had the
interesting.
experience of being a step sibling. So I really have 0 experience with it, and then, yeah, and then I'm not dating anybody now, so I'm, like, living through you and what you're telling me, so you're my expert.
Yeah, and it is and there it's definitely difficult. I would say the hardest part of it is that my role is just different than
Yeah.
an actual parent. I see my role as I'm there to support Jeff in his parenting,
Mhm.
and, I'll provide him feedback and my thoughts, but ultimately decisions about his kids are between him and their mom and aren't up to me. And same discipline can be tough, where it's just different when you've had a bonded relationship to a child from the day they were born, as opposed to you showed up in their life when they were even little, 4 or 5. Like, Jeff yelling at them, and when I say yelling, I mean, Jeff disciplining them, they're going to get over easier than me disciplining them. And it's just really not a role that I feel is appropriate or that, I should be the disciplinarian. I think there's a difference between being the adult in charge and being the disciplinarian, kind of like a teacher. When you send your kid to school, they're the adult in charge. They're going to correct behavior. They're not gonna just let the kid do whatever they want, but ultimately the parent is the one who has a conversation and implements some consequences, for what happens in the home, etcetera. And that's kinda how I see it as, when Jeff's not around, and it's not as big of a deal now that the kids are teenagers. When they were little, and, if I were watching the kids and something happened, like, I would correct in the moment, but then it would be like, "We're gonna have to talk to your daddy and see, what the consequences or whatever." And that's hard, and it's especially hard if, you and your spouse aren't complete, and I think few people are 100% eye to eye on, how discipline should work, what should consequences be, what behavior is a big deal, and especially now that we're getting to teenagers, like, oh my god, like, it's all such a gray area, but
Right.
curfews and, when they're dating, can they be in the
Yes.
bedroom with the person they're dating? Should the door be open? Should the door be closed? Like, I mean, it is
Well, the
so
thing
much.
is that what I think we're so hard on ourselves that we feel like we should have it all figured out, but we're all literally in this for the first time,
Yeah.
as well as our partners, as well as even if you are dating somebody. So, like, let's say I date somebody that doesn't have kids. This was a scenario like years ago, and this person was like, "Well, I don't have kids, so I don't know like what I should or shouldn't do at this moment." And I'm like, well, guess what? Like, this is my first time that I have a kid at this age, too. Like, yes, I have a couple of years before you, but I've never had a kid be at the next age and the next, the next, the next. And there's really no manual rule book to know because things change all the time. The fears that we dealt with as a kid, riding around our bikes, and coming home at dark and no cell phones, no internet. It's a lot different now, the world we're in. There's so many new things that we have to worry about that we have to consider new rules and, you
Mhm.
know, what I think like when a child gets in trouble, for example, I've dealt with this, and you want to uphold, you know, I can't, what is the word in my head? A discipline action. When you want
A
to uphold,
consequence or
yes, yes, when you want to uphold a consequence, for something and you say, "Okay, well, basically when they're at my house that they're not gonna get the cell phone and it's for a full week or 2 weeks, and between that time, you might be between both parents' houses."
Mhm.
Well, it's important to make sure that you come together as parents and say, "We're sticking to it." And it's following through so they don't feel like the kid is like, "Oh, I got my way with dad versus
Yeah.
mom," you know? Um, that's where I think it's really important to communicate.
Yeah, and I think that there's some co-parents who aren't able to do that. So you have to keep that in mind of creating a consequence that only applies in your own home
That's
because
true.
you don't
Yeah.
have the co-parent who's willing to do that.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think overall, patience, consistency, and just, like, lots of communication. It's
Yeah.
really I wish there was, like, a secret sauce to this, but it's a lot of figuring it out and knowing that time is really important too.
Yeah, and just focusing on making your own home the best place it can possibly be and not focusing on the other parent's home.
Yeah, like, let it go. I see too many friends of mine too that hold on to things, and it's not worth the energy and stress. It's no different than if things are changed in the workplace and you can't control what happens, you know?
Yeah,
It
just in general, stressing out over things we can't control isn't healthy for us. We need to focus on what we can control, and that's it.
Yeah. So, let's see, I would love to know, would you change anything differently going into your blended family situation, knowing what you know
Yeah,
now?
that's a really good question. So, I think the one thing that maybe I would change is giving Jeff more time before we got into a serious relationship. So, he had been extremely freshly divorced.
Oh.
And I'd been divorced for, I don't know, a couple of years, maybe 2, 3 years. And I mean, he had been divorced for a month or 2.
Oh,
And
wow, I
I
didn't even
did
realize that.
yeah, I did see that as a red flag, but he had been in individual therapy. Their divorce, like most divorces, it took some time. So they hadn't been living in the same house for a while. And so his individual therapist had told him that she feels he's ready to date. And so I took that as, all right, he's ready to date. But there's a difference between being ready to date and your entire family being ready for that transition. So, like, I think his co-parenting relationship, they had not figured out how to co-parent yet. And so, like, this real now, and mom was also in another relationship. So it was just a lot for the kids at
Mhm.
once, a lot for their co-parenting relationship at once. And so in retrospect, I think it would have been good to have given Jeff more time to figure out his co-parenting relationship
Right.
before adding on to it, like, okay, now who's going to sell their house? And we ended up both selling, all of that complication. Other than that, like as far as timing, I wouldn't really have changed anything else. And, when I say like, I would have made the timing different, maybe up like 6 to 12 months. Nothing like, oh, I would have dated for 5 years. Just, I would have given it a little bit more time for them to figure out that co-parenting dynamic before adding this on.
I would agree there too. Even though I'm not in a relationship now, I did jump into one rather quickly within like a couple of months. And, time, you really do need to give yourself time for you to figure out your own groove, what you want to do, like how you live as a single person then essentially. And a parent to 2 kids, or no, I'm sorry, not a parent to 2 kids, but 2 parenting roles essentially. Because when you have your child at that time, when you have the split custody, I'm now acting as mom and dad in that situation. So it's a lot to manage and juggle. And then to bring a relationship into the mix, I would have
Yeah.
waited a year at least just to kind of go through and heal and figure myself out and get in a groove, and then have my daughter understand what the new norm is at that time.
Yeah.
It's hard otherwise. So I'm going to run through just some, like, let's give some top 5 like takeaways. So I feel like kids do their best when adults act like adults.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard, but I think that's the most important thing. And to know that co-parenting and blended families, it doesn't require meaning that you have to be friends. Like I know that I have a friendly situation in my world. I think you do too.
Yeah,
Or
acting
amicable.
friendly is very different than being
Being
friends.
friends. That is a really good point. It requires a whole lot of respect.
Yeah.
And that's what it falls down to. And then blended families, they really work well when there's flexibility. So knowing, again, like you said, that you cannot control every single outcome. It's really,
No. Yeah, you have to be flexible.
and then don't keep score, right? So I think that's something that I had to let go of, knowing that we talked about this on another episode, that if I'm the one that's buying all the things here and he's not buying the things there, or it's the same thing with like, what activities they're doing there versus here, or the rules, or it's just 2 different households. You have to know and accept that. And then I think another big one that you mentioned too, which is really important, is letting kids move at their own pace.
Yeah.
To not force the relationships. I think like we all want to be liked. And one day I'll end up in a situation where I might be a stepmom to somebody, and I'll go through it and I'll come to you for advice and you'll have to remind me. But I think that's the biggest thing, is that even in relationships and friendships, we want to be liked.
Yeah, absolutely. As a stepmom, I want to be liked, but it's okay if the kids don't like me. Sometimes kids don't like a step parent. I think they like me now, but it took a while.
They do. They do. They do. And your relationship and your bond, I just have to say, it's awesome. And I know that you've been with the kids for many, many years, but it's cool. I almost see it like you're kind of like that aunt that you can still set the boundaries with them. And that's really the last one too, is that it's okay to set boundaries.
Yeah.
But just be kind. So we hope that this information was really helpful. And maybe one takeaway is, what if you're in a blended family situation, what is one thing you can do to soften the dynamic between your blended family, or that you might look at and do differently? So thanks for hanging out. This has been great. Make sure to keep listening and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at A Holistic Dose on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And follow us for more fun online at aholisticdose.com. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back next week with more unfiltered friend talk right here on A Holistic Dose.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.